Hi, we are Team A and we will present the semestral research work about a clinical case. The team is confirmed by Cruz Mondragón Andrea Daniela, Denise Aguilar Lisette Estefanía, Lozano Silva Joaquín Armando y Zapot Sánchez Arón. The prescribed medication was doxycycline and streptomycin. Doxycycline is an antibiotic belonging to the tetracycline class. It was prescribed to treat brucellosis, which is a bacterial infection caused by Brussels species. Test results showed that the woman had a positive blood culture to Brucella. Doxycycline acts by inhibiting the protein synthesis of the bacteria, preventing from growing and multiplying. Streptomycin: this is another antibiotic belonging to the aminoglycoside class. It was also prescribed to treat brucellosis in combination with doxycycline. Streptomycin acts by binding to the tertiary ribosomal subunit of the bacterium, interfering with the actuation of the genetic message and causing of production of abnormal proteins. The prescription was correct according to the clinical features in the Part 3. Because the woman had signs and symptoms of brucellosis, such as fever, fatigue, headache, swollen lymph nodes, and white spots on the tonsils. Brucellosis can also cause gastrointestinal, respiratory, and nervous system complications, which might explain the woman's diarrhea, abdominal pain, and allergic rhinitis.
The reason why the lower back pain disappeared. In part 4. In the context of the woman's symptoms, we assume she has brucellosis, so the subsequent treatment she underwent aimed at the disappearance of the bacterial infection. Instead, the lower back pain disappeared, likely due to the administration of the antibiotics that in this case targeted another infection that could have been underdeveloped due to the brucellosis. In the case of the woman in the story, she experienced pain on the right side of her lower back, which is not a common symptom of brucellosis. Instead, it is of kidney infections. Kidney infections, also known as pyelonephritis, can cause pain in the lumbar or lower back region. The lower back pain in this context could be due to the kidney infection, which might be a complication of untreated or poorly managed bacterial infections, such as brucellosis. In the presented case, the final treatment with doxycycline and streptomycin, while not typical treatment for kidney infections, seems to have addressed the underlying cause of the infection and thus relieved the symptoms, including lower back pain. Therefore, it is reasonable to consider that the lower back pain could have been attributable to a kidney infection associated with the woman's condition. One of the sequels of the disease found in test number 2 and the explanation of why the sequel develops for that disease. The test results, test number 2, indicated the presence of elevated titers for Salmonella typhi O and H, which are indicative of a past infection of typhoid fever caused by Salmonella typhi. One of the sequels associated with this disease can be a condition called chronic carrier state. Chronic carrier state occurs when an individual post-recovery from acute typhoid fever continues to harbor the Salmonella typhi bacteria in their gallbladder or other tissues. This state can persist for an extended period, and the carrier might not exhibit active symptoms. However, they can become a potential source of infections for others. This complication develops due to the nature of Salmonella typhi bacteria. After recovery from the acute illness, some individuals continue to shed the bacteria in their feces, which can contaminate their water or food, leading to the spread of the disease to others. In the case of the woman described in this scenario, the elevated titers of Salmonella typhi indicate a past infection. However, the chronic carrier state would explain why she might not have been actively symptomatic but still had the potential to spread the bacteria, and why her symptoms in the current scenario might be associated with a different infection, in this case Brucella, rather than an active case of typhoid fever.
On the other hand, The positive test result to 1 by 320 suggests infection to Salmonella typhi with typhoid fever. The risk factors can include consumption of contaminated food or water, and the woman's dietary habits may have exposed her to this pathogen. Remember that she eats takeout and usually cheap street food. On this, a healthy and diverse gut microbiota can act as a protective barrier against pathogenic bacteria like Salmonella. The graph shows the main gut microbial phyla that are related as a protective factors, but it is important to mention that there is no singular optimal intestinal microbiota composition. It is different for each individual, and this pie chart is only a general idea of the composition of our microbiota, and it can vary according to our diet. The dietary choices of the patient can significantly affect the composition of her intestinal microbiota. The most important is that a lack of fiber from vegetables can reduce its diversity. So, the patient's diet, while it's not strict, is very similar to the Western diet, where we can observe a less stability in the microbiota and differences in the microorganisms present, such as Firmicutes in green, Bacteroidetes in color blue, and Proteobacteria in red, in contrast to a higher diversity as seen is in the Mediterranean diet, where vegetable consumption is higher, and in contrast to a vegetarian diet too. We can observe a comparison between a healthy microbiota and a deficient one. In conditions in which the microbiota is absent, such as a poor diet, there is reduced competition, bioresistant, and immune defense against pathogen invasion. The evidence suggests that disruption of the microbiota may compromise immune function, leading to increased susceptibility to infectious disease. So, insufficient intake of fiber may contribute to microbiota dysbiosis, leading to intestinal barrier dysfunction. So, in the case of this woman, her diet may have led to an imbalance in her gut microbiota, making her more susceptible to certain infections. Finally, the graph shows 4 potentially pathogenic intestinal bacteria, which could also be risky for the patient given her habits. For all cases, although specifically for Salmonella, results are lower in abundance in the microbiota of BF bar, as we can see in color strong gray. There are people consuming a diet rich in fruit and fiber.
Now, let's explain the natural history of the disease of Salmonella typhi. Natural history is the course of the disease progression, and it consists of 5 stages: susceptibility, incubation, prodromal, acute, and convalescence. In susceptibility stage, individuals are at risk of contracting a salmonella infection by consuming contaminated food or water. Just as we know, the woman used to eat takeout food and street food. Probably, in one of those moments, the food had a poor hygiene and she got exposed there. Once a person is exposed to salmonella, the incubation stage begins. The length of the incubation period for a salmonella infection can range from 6 to 72 hours. The prodromal stage involves the initial symptoms. The woman's prodromal symptoms include headache, fatigue, intermittent fever, abdominal discomfort, and diarrhea. These symptoms may be non-specific, but are signs that the infection is progressing. The acute stage represents the peak of the infection, where the woman experienced severe symptoms like high fever, fatigue, anorexia, and more intense abdominal pain. There was also excessive sleep, and she continued with diarrhea. After the acute stage, individuals with salmonella infections get into convalescent stage. During this period, symptoms gradually improve and the person starts to recover. At the end of the treatment, the woman preserved tiredness and joint pain that could be explained because of a reactive arthritis, which is caused by an infection. Now, let's move on to the point risk factors associated with Salmonella paratyphi. Several risk factors in her lifestyle and medical history may be associated with this disease. First, we have the diet and food handling practices. The woman's frequent consumption of takeout food, which may not always be prepared and handled with strict hygiene standards, could have exposed her to contaminated food. Also, her hygiene in washing hands is mentioned. It is said that the woman washes her hands after eating. However, it is not mentioned that she does it before. So if she ate without washing her hands after going to the bathroom, she could have contaminated her own food. Also, her history of colitis might have weakened her gastrointestinal tract's defense, making her more susceptible to bacterial infections. Colitis can disrupt the normal gut flora and integrity of the intestinal lining, while seasonal allergies plus the stress and fatigue make her more susceptible to infections, just as the lack of variety of nutrients and fiber because of a low vegetables intake.